So a lot of people have been telling me lately that my photo editing style is giving off a Wes Anderson vibe, and honestly it's the best compliment I've ever got, and it's happening a lot.
This is Grace. Grace is a photographer who has been getting comments like, "Wow, this photo gives Wes Anderson." Little do they know, Mr. Wes Anderson actually copied Grace. At least she's humble.
So if you're not familiar with Wes Anderson, he is a film director of many amazing movies such as The Grand Budapest Hotel, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and Moonrise Kingdom. All of his movies are very aesthetic. He has a very dreamy, retro editing style, and he uses amazing pastels. He uses very saturated colors. It's a very specific style. And I honestly didn't even know that I was being inspired by him until people started commenting on my Instagram, and then it flipped a switch. I love Wes Anderson's style. I think his movies are so unique. He uses a lot of symmetry. He uses a lot of like dreamy haziness. And it's a different type of cinematic, not the cinematic that you have in mind where it's these blues, greens and reds. Generally when we think of cinematic, this is what I think of anyways. It's not that stark contrast. He uses a lot of pastels, and as I said before, he uses a lot of saturated colors and symmetry to show this kind of cinematic style that he has, and honestly I'm in love with it. I love his style. So what we're going to be doing today is showing you how I would edit my photos to give that Wes Anderson vibe step by step. So let's get into it. Now when I think of Wes Anderson, I think of clean lines, I think of symmetry, I think of pastel colors, I think of saturated colors, I think of retro, hazy and unique. That is the main thing. So this is why I chose this photo. Okay, so I have Lightroom open here. The first thing that we're gonna wanna do is to open the photo that we previously discussed, something that has potential for symmetry. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to the crop and straighten tab in Lightroom Classic. Now Lightroom does have this, I use this every time. It's a great feature. It is straighten. So we're just gonna click auto here, and that's gonna automatically straighten our image so it's not wonky. So that's the first thing that I do. Secondly, we're going to change the aspect ratio. So I like to put mine in 16:10 ratio. This allows me to then make those carousels on Instagram where I can separate it into two photos that swipe over and make one image. I'll put an example here, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. This kind of aspect ratio does kind of give that cinematic feel because it's still really wide, but it's also cropped from the top and the bottom. So the next thing that we're gonna do is, I don't like this lamppost here, so I'm gonna try AI remove and see how it does with that. And we're just gonna highlight this and a little bit of the outskirts of the light as well. So Lightroom really knows what to fill it in with. This is a mistake that I see a lot of people do, is that they just highlight the very like outskirts of the item that they want to remove, and then Lightroom has a little bit of difficulty removing that item because it's not really sure about the background. I think, well, that's what it's been happening to me. So I just go a little bit outside the item and let's remove and see how that does there now. Then it gives you variations of the remove tool. So there's still a little bit left. So you know what, I'm gonna keep this on and then I'm gonna try remove again, just because I don't want to bring this into Photoshop right now for the purpose of this video. So let me see if I can just remove this again. And we click apply, and then it takes a minute or two to generate. Okay, so Lightroom's having a bit of difficulty, and I think I know what is wrong. So I think the crop is not allowing Lightroom to really understand what I'm trying to remove. So I'm gonna go back and uncrop it the way it originally was. So it was this size originally, and then I'm going to remove it at that size originally because I think it's just having difficulty understanding what it is, and it is a light pole. So let me see if that works any better. And apply. Let's see. Fingers crossed. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, see that it worked really, really well. So Lightroom was able to remove that and it actually looks phenomenal. Wow. Okay, so now that it's removed, I'm gonna go back to my crop, which is 16 by 10. Is then adjust the white balance. So generally I like to put it up into the yellows rather than down into the blues, because the blues is not really his vibe. It's more of that vintage retro feel. So I'm gonna bump this up quite a bit, as we can see here. And then we're gonna come down to the tint, and this really depends on the photo, but generally I like to bump it up a little bit in the pinks, because the pinks and the yellows work really well together. Next, we're gonna adjust our exposure. Now this is gonna depend on your photo. Mine was a little bit underexposed, so I'm just gonna bump that up. That's not necessary if you have a properly exposed photo. Now this is kind of where it gets a little bit controversial. I've actually had photographers call me out for this, but I like to bring my contrast down. I think it gives a little bit of a more vintage feel. And then same with the highlights, because it gives that little bit of a flat look, and I kind of like that. I think it does kind of give Wes Anderson. You can see the difference here. So this would be like normal, and then this is when the highlights are down. It gives it more of like an animated sort of look, I think. Here. Then for the whites, I'm gonna bring them down a little bit in this photo because it is very, very bright now. And then for the blacks, it's gonna be kind of the same as the contrast. I don't want it to be that much black, so I am gonna bring that slider up a little bit. But again, it depends on your personal preference. Now, so I can get the exact photo that I have posted and I get the example of, I just copied the settings from that one and I am going to paste them onto this photo, because I do a lot of work on the tone curve and I didn't want it to be like totally different. I wanted to show you my actual process, and I probably wouldn't be able to 100% replicate everything I did. So for the purpose of that, I pasted the settings and I'm just gonna go through them one by one from the tone curve on. So generally what I do with all my photos is I come down here and I make some kind of an S curve. So I have planted 3 dots here and it follows some kind of an S curve. It's same for the reds, it kind of follows an S shape. I just play with these tone curves until I find something I really like in terms of color. And same with the green, it usually generally follows an S curve. But with this many dots, it gives you a lot of creativity. It can get a little bit crazy, but just play around with it. Like for example, we'll take this dot because there's a few here. You can see how much it affects the photo. I'm just gonna pop that back where it was. And for example here, you can see it can get really crazy. But this is how I like to experiment with my photos. So that is the greens and the reds, the blues, and then the highlights and shadows. So the next thing that we're gonna do is, this is my new favorite tool. I didn't use this for like the first 3 years of photography, but this is my favorite now, especially when I'm trying to pinpoint colors. So I'm gonna come down here to the color mixer and I'm just gonna pop this over here and I'm gonna grab this yellow. That allows me then to edit this specific yellow. So I'll show you here. You can make it red, you can make it orange, you can change the color however you want. I kind of just bumped it up a little bit to a more saturated yellow. So this is the previous one I've done here. So this is where it was. It wasn't very saturated and I brought it over here so it really pops. I think it was somewhere over here. Let me just make sure. Yeah, it was something like this. So I really, really enjoy picking a color and then playing with it. So for example, the sky, it's a little bit turquoise, so we are going to change it a little bit. Yeah, I like that. So originally, as you can see, the dot was here. I brought it over here because I like that color just a little bit more. I think it stands out more with the yellow. So you can pick whatever color that you want in your photo and you can change it You can also change the hue shift and the saturation shift. So we have this blue here, so I'm going to show you what that does. So that's going to bring down the brightness of that color. This is going to bring up the brightness of that color. Sorry, this is the saturation. So this is going to bring up the saturation of that color, and bring it down here. It's going to bring down the saturation of that color. So I will pop it, I'll give it another 20. And then you can play with the hue shift as well. So this obviously makes it darker. This is bringing it more turquoise. Now I actually really like that. I think that's given Wes Anderson. So I'm actually going to leave that down here at about, we'll just say 50, 51. I think that looks good. I actually really like that. Yeah. Okay, next thing we're going to do is my second favorite thing ever, is playing with the color grading. Now I don't do a lot here because it gets really crazy, but this is the midtones, this is the shadows, and then this is the highlights. So you can see here I just brought this up here a tiny bit from the middle. That's the midtones, so that's what's given this kind of color here. And the shadows, I brought them down a little bit as well. And then the highlights, they're all kind of reflecting like a blue tone. Generally in my photos, I like to have a green, is it midtones I usually? Yeah, I usually like to have like a green midtones, and that's what kind of gives my photos that kind of color that I like. So for example, I'll show you here. If I was to do green, it would kind of be something like this. But yeah, I like it around here. I think that brings up the Wes Anderson-y vibe. So that is color grading in Lightroom. You can individually go into these a little bit more as well if you click into them. And then global is just the general colors in your image. Now I'm looking at this image and I'm wondering if my, okay. Yeah, I had a feeling, I knew. I was thinking it looks a little bit wonky, so it must have reset that time when I changed the crop. So I'm just going to change that back to minus 0.22. Yeah, that looks much better. I knew there was something off there. I knew. Okay, the next thing we are going to do is, after the color grading, I don't think this photo has any noise in it, but the AI denoise is phenomenal. It is like insane. There is actually, you can see the noise here. See all these little bits of grain. It's actually quite a bit of noise. I thought this was very sharp, but anyways. Okay, so we are going to use the noise reduction, the AI, and we'll see how that does. I like to kind of keep it at about 50% because I feel like if you go any higher, it looks really fake. It looks very AI. This will flag on Instagram as use of AI. You know, the way sometimes it comes up on the top of your photo generated by AI. Using anything like this will flag that. That does not mean that your entire photography was made with AI. It just means that you are using AI in your editing process. And, you know, it's each to their own. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I know it could bother some people. But yeah, so I'm gonna leave that about 51, and we're just gonna click enhance. That takes sometimes it can take like 3 or 4 minutes if your photo is like really noisy. It depends on, if you do 100%, it's gonna take longer. If you do 50%, it's gonna obviously take less long. So let me see how that did now. And we're gonna zoom back in. Look at the job that did. That's phenomenal. Oh my goodness. Like, excuse me? And that was at 50%, bear in mind. Okay, so that is that. I actually think we're almost done with this photo. I don't like to do a lot, but it's mainly the colors that I go after. So I don't really touch any of this because we already brought down our clarity. There's no need to bring up the sharpness. We've brought down our texture. Same with here, I don't really touch these. And then lens correction, I don't touch this either. Also don't really touch any of this. I mean, if your photo was really weirdly warped, or you wanted to, how do I explain this? So just say you took a photo of a building like this one and you took it at an angle, you could change how you see that. So I'm just gonna, I'll show you just so you can see. So transform vertical, so you'll see now. You can make it kind of like taller, you can bring it this way. I don't like choosing any of this because I feel like it just warps it really weirdly. I honestly just don't like using it, but again, each to their own. You could do some really cool things with this. Now the very last thing that I would do, because we're trying to give that retro feel, is to add a little bit of grain. Now I don't normally like to do this with my photos because, I don't know, it just feels so wrong. I spent all this time with denoise and investing in a really sharp lens, and to put grain on it for aesthetic reasons, sometimes I love, and then sometimes it makes me feel sick. But just for the purpose of this video, let's just have a look. So as you can see, the grain on this photo was already at 39, so I actually must have put some in when I was doing the previous photo, and then I copied my settings and pasted my settings onto this photo. So let's just see, I'll just show you what the grain actually does to a photo. Now I would never recommend doing 100% grain because you can see what it does to the photo. It just kind of reversed everything we did with the noise reduction and etc. But you know, it does look kind of cool. So each to their own. I do like grain, but not at 100%. So I'm gonna bring that back down. I think it was at like 39. So I'm gonna bring that back down there. And yeah, that is the final photo. The only other thing that I probably would have done, I'm not sure if Lightroom is going to be very happy, but I would take this off. Let me see if I can remove that. These are just like the final tweaks. And then we press apply, generate, remove. And it does give you tips actually here. So yeah, it does tell you to highlight a little bit around the edges. So that actually did an amazing job. Yeah, these things make a difference. So let's zoom out and see. Wow, okay, that looks amazing. That did a great job. I can't see anything else that I would do differently. So here's another photo that I took, and it's already edited, but it's very like Wes Anderson-y vibes. It's already color graded, so I just wanted to show you this version. But in the last version, I didn't really use the dehaze slider in the way that I normally do because it was already quite hazy and I need to change it. But this is what I would generally do to give that, you know, whimsical kind of retro feel. The dehaze slider is so critical. So here's this photo here. It's almost the same settings I used in the last one in terms of color and stuff, but I brought the dehaze right down to 54, and you can see it gives it lovely haze. So I'm gonna show you, like, this is minus 100, so this is like the full extent of that slider, so you can see what it really does. So I'm gonna bring it back to what I originally was. Okay, that's with a lot of edits, but this makes such a difference. It makes it feel almost nostalgic, I feel. I just love using the dehaze slider, and I just wanted to show the importance of that in terms of making something very like retro, nostalgic and whimsical. The dehaze paired with increased highlights as well is just beautiful. It makes something give fairy vibes, and I love it. So that is the result of using the dehaze slider there. So that is how to make your photos Wes Anderson-y. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of this video. Tag me in your photos if you use this Wes Anderson type video to edit your photos. I would love to see them, and I'll share them on my Instagram, etc. So please do tag me if you found this helpful. If you have any comments, leave them below. And also, for everybody who's stuck around, I have saved this preset. I named it Wes Anderson, and it will be available for everybody who comments preset for totally free on this YouTube video. Thank you so much for watching this video, and now go watch Fantastic Mr. Fox or the Grand Budapest Hotel and get inspired and go out and start taking pictures, please. Thank you. Bye-bye.